and welcome to today's show. Today we have on some very special guests. We're focusing on citizens today, as we usually do, but with a little more emphasis. Some people call them advocates, some people call them chronic callers. But we here at Citizens Review would like to call them, similar to bloggers in the United States, citizen journalists. They're often overlooked, not appreciated, but they provide us with some of the analysis that we appreciate every day. And so we're going to have them on the show today. Also, I want to focus on something a little different for our show, but it's important to each and every one of us out there. This weekend I got a call from a cousin of mine who found out that his grandfather is near passing. He also was prepared to go and visit his father because his father is in somewhat the same situation. And that made me think of some things that I think I want to address with you in this intro today. Also, I got a call that suggested that my grandmother is sick and in hospital. And I'll be off this weekend to go and make sure that everything is all right with her. But again, that made me think of some things that I want to address with my viewers. And it's about what is important. There are times when we focus on all the wrong things. And everyone out there knows what I'm talking about. We focus on our cars, we focus on our homes, we focus on a home project, we focus on Lenten teas and all kinds of fun stuff that have nothing to do with what really matters and all to do with our material shortcomings. Well, I'm suggesting to my viewers out there, all of you watching on citizensreviewtv.com that may be in college, maybe Bahamians living in South Florida, or people interested in the Bahamas, and especially my viewers right here in the Bahamas and living rooms watching. Let's focus on the important stuff. My pastor, Ranfully Brown, preached on taking relationships seriously, using the time that we have to build the kind of relationships and reconcile in our relationships so that we could focus on what is important. My grandmother, Natalie Harvey, was the kind of woman, that strong, great, black, Christian woman who showed us and taught us the things we needed to know. She's responsible for what people often term as my old soul. She taught me the old sayings, and she is the person who, for most of us, that grandmother made the post-slavery experience real for us, the talk of the struggle, and not just rhetoric about struggle or intellectualizing on struggle. I talking about Robin Hood flower bag, wearing them to get across as clothes. I talking about the real existence of what it was to be a Bahamian in the days gone, and how young people like myself need to internalize those experiences so that we understand how to take our country forward. That is what she served as for me. Last night I read the story of a barefoot boy turned prime minister about Hubert Ingram. I read a little bit of excerpts from Dame Marguerite Pinling's book, Being from Mangrove Key and Growing Up Barefoot in the Yard. These are our kinds of existences. This is what we all know as Bahamians. Some people from Nassau may not know about the barefoot existence, but we share common stories. It ain't a FNM story, it ain't a PLP story, it's a Bahamian story. And this is how we'll build our country. We have to catalog it, we have to write it, we have to praise persons like my grandmother while they're alive, and begin to take things in life that are more important seriously. It's hard to live next door to your children and not know who they are, but buy them a Mercedes for Christmas. We got to get to what's the meat of it. So that's what I encourage you. I'll certainly be doing it because I'm a citizen just like everybody else. I want to send a message out to my aunts, Ethlyn, Annie Patty, Annie Rosie, Uncle Keith, Glenn, who passed early in his life. All will be well, and thy will be done. Think about that. Just think about that. Take the more important things serious. Next up, I'll introduce our guests, and we'll get this show on the road. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back to Citizens Review. We have here our exciting guests for the day, our two citizen journalists, as I deem them. We have Lady Philippa Russell, and we have Mr. Sidney, as Audlin Bodie calls him, MacArthur Walter Thompson. Yes, lady and gentlemen, a lot of issues to be discussed. I know you all have done the research. You all seek the facts. Let's talk about some stuff. Mr. Thompson, you want to talk about crime.
Yes, I want to specifically address the issue of service, particularly with the hierarchy of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, because you cannot have a commissioner who tells the public that he has a new policy, whereas some of his senior officers, particularly the Assistant Commissioner for Crime and the person who's in charge of corruption and complaints, acting in a manner that the commissioner himself has not acted toward the public.
And the commissioner has certainly given us a good front.
No, because see, I have had interaction with him, and I'm impressed with what he's trying to do. I think he needs to check his senior officers to make sure that they're following the good example that he himself is setting, because that's going to make the police force look bad.
Yes.
You cannot have a senior officer in the police force who is treating the public one way and some others who are going to treat them with contempt. Now, let me just read something here from the CDR report, which says, we have been made familiar with all of the above recommendations, and these have been incorporated where current evidence was found to support them. It has become apparent that despite rising crime levels with a perception of increasingly poor police performance, and amid mounting public concern, there has been little or no progress towards the implementation of most of those essential changes and improvements. Now, I believe the commissioner there has to keep a tab on his senior officers to make sure that they are following in the example that he sets.
Well, I could attest to those facts because I just wear suits all the time. So I can't imagine the kind of treatment that other young men get. But I've had police harass me on several occasions about nonsense, nothing that really exists. But they just seek to assert their power on me.
When you have an officer who says to me, who are you? See, I take that as a contemptuous spirit and attitude.
It is.
If you cannot answer a query from a member of the public, or you don't want to answer it, then say so. I have no problem with that.
I've had an officer deny me right to see his number.
Yes.
An officer tell me, no, you can't see my number. Come from around here. You know, that kind of thing, that should not be tolerated. I know you have some comments.
I am concerned recently that I've seen them resorting to strike force gear, SWAT team gear.
Yeah, they just walk around with AK-47s in the street and around children. And
while I know that that might be necessary in going into, let's say, a shanty town or a drug bust or something of that nature. On an assignment. Last week I saw in the newspaper an officer with the gear on. And so I see it as a subtle form of intimidation by people who don't understand the authority that they already have.
Okay. Well, let's look at the positive side. Now, there are some police officers who are doing their job.
Agreed.
There are some
and I agree that they even need that sort of uniform to protect their anonymity and their family safety in what is becoming an increasingly violent city to police. But you've got to check the psychology behind the person that you're giving this kind of authority to, and to ensure that the public does not become the victim of what is intended to be our protectors.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Thompson, to your point, I would suggest that there's a serious problem based on what you're talking about,
Yes.
using this evidence. In Bimini, there was a situation where an officer was attacked almost some
Yes.
year ago.
Yeah, about over a year.
And the public sentiment seemed to be, well, see these police, they always come and that's what they get.
Yes.
Once the police force sees that the sentiment amongst citizens is, when you get hurt, that's what you deserve, there's a problem. It's
Big
almost
problems.
like the challenging idea that we think it is okay for our prison to be as disgusting as it is,
Yes.
as part of the punishment. And that's a human rights violation. What do you say to that?
No, I agree with that because you see, the police have a responsibility to protect the Bahamian people, not to abuse them,
Agreed.
not to take advantage of them. You see, that is their mandate. And when that does not happen, particularly in black belt areas where people constantly see a negative image from the police force, where they come in with this kind of force, when they come into an area where I am, they come dressed in these blue and they come with their guns.
Yes.
Even when there was a fire, they came with guns. What you come in with guns for? You had the fire engine there.
Yeah.
I don't know why,
Yeah.
but that is the image they come into the area. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
You see, if you expect to get the cooperation of the public to deal with this violent crime wave, the highest we had was in 2009, the worst crime wave in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I think the police force ought to look at that, understand why it happened, and begin to give the kind of service to the Bahamian people that we need.
My final question on this issue, and either of you can field it, is what do you say to a police officer who says that they have bigger guns than us, they are more intimidating than us, they are scary, the crime wave is indicative of the fact that we need to be more intimidating? What do you say to police officers who say that this is necessary to curb crime?
I will say to them, they tell me they're well-trained, they're well-qualified, they're well-educated, they're well-disciplined, then I expect you to be just that.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of them good old-time answers. Listen, behave like you say you are.
Exactly.
Amen.
I don't know what kind of experience that Mr. Thompson, my good friend, has had recently with the police, but I haven't had any unpleasant experiences. I am noticing, however, the trend to show that they are matched to the force that's out here in the street. And I say that's good, but show the criminal that. It's not for the normal law-abiding citizen.
So don't assume criminality.
And we don't need to be intimidated, not the community.
Yeah.
You know where the criminals are. Go get them and deal with it.
All right, let's talk about this next issue. You have a clipping here. I like these clippings. You know, this proof. Paralysis and policy making. This is the editorial for Tuesday this week in the Bahama
Yesterday.
Journal. Let's talk about paralysis and policy making. And I want to add something to that. This press release that I received from Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, dear.
Mr. Paul Moss, attorney and financier, has said that he is resigning from the PLP. I'll give you some of his comments. The Bahamas is at a crossroads. We are rich with potential, but there are many pitfalls to navigate as well. If the current dearth of visionary leadership prevails, our country will reach a point of no return. It's time for us to detour and get back on track. Paralysis and policy making. What do you say?
Fundamental to getting any national solution requires a head-on approach to the problem. And our problem has been the character of the people we've elected to leadership.
You would say that Mr. Ingram is not taking a head-on approach. That's not his common characterization. He's often characterized as a fella that takes the issues by hand, steady hands, tough, tested leadership. Is there anything to that?
Mr. Ingram reminds me of a classic manic depressive. There are times when, you know, he's out there approaching everything head on, getting on everyone's nerves, and then months of apathy and disengagement.
Yeah.
You can't run a country like that.
You can't deny the 1,800 people in Elizabeth who didn't vote.
You can't deny it.
These are facts.
And in my opinion, and some very professional, highly trained persons agree that what we have in our leadership is a manifestation of sociopathic disorder. a desire to be seen, a desire to be on the front page, as opposed to getting into the nuts and bolts of getting the job done. So we're looking at massive incompetence, but a lot of photo opportunities.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I think the kind of leadership we need is really slave leadership.
Okay.
Okay, because you see, a slave works for his master.
Now that's an inflammatory term.
No, but it has to be
Explain
understood.
that to
No,
us.
I explain it. You
Okay.
see, because what we got is Gentile leadership. All right? Gentile leadership is where this particular personality sits in authority and dictates to the public. Whereas Jesus said, he that is greatest among you must be your slave. If you look at the example of Jesus himself, they couldn't even tell that he was the leader.
Interesting.
You had someone who had to betray him, who was intimate with him. So when you look at our leaders today, they stick out like a sore thumb.
Certainly.
Okay? They are not identifying with the local people they're supposed to be serving. Okay? So our concept of leadership needs to be changed. And the people need to understand that they have to understand the character of the persons that they're electing.
Okay.
That is the key element that we have overlooked.
Let me ask one question before we go to this break. Mr. Moss also speaks beyond the leaders to our philosophy. He says, and I remain strongly committed to the original philosophy of the PLP as espoused by the late great leader Sir Lyndon Pinling and other visionaries of his ilk and generation. That philosophy, while it no longer exists in the PLP, is entrenched in my heart and, I am sure, in the hearts of the majority of Bahamians who are looking for new direction. I'm getting signal to go to a break. Let's take that in, and we'll be back right after these messages to discuss that.
Great.
We're back here with Mrs. Sidney Thompson and Philippa Lady Russell. I said it wrong the last time. I corrected it this time. I apologize. Before we went to the break, we talked about Paul Moss asserting that the philosophy is lost. And I'm assuming that Mr. Moss is not only talking about the PLP because he's left AFNM before. So perhaps he's talking to both parties. But he also goes to the next step and says that the philosophy is entrenched in his heart and in the heart of the majority of Bahamians. I believe that to be true. What are your comments on that? Have we also moved from Gentile leadership to a whole party under these Gentile leaders who have lost their way?
We have an entrenched Gentile system of governance.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Okay.
Okay, it has been magnified because the persons who are supposed to be serving, as God told Samuel, they will take. That's what Gentiles do. They don't give anything.
Okay.
They don't share anything. All right? So we have to understand that. What has to happen is that we need to have a change of attitude, a change of behavior, and that has to come from the public. They have to want it.
Okay.
Okay? We have to seek for persons in the community. Because, see, those forefathers back then, they did a lot of good things for us. They set a powerful example for us. Some of them stood up. Where we have today, some of the highly educated people with their masters, their doctorates, they're this and they're that, they throw rock, duck behind the wall. They don't want to be seen.
No.
Those men and women back there had something called character, which most of these leaders, if not all of them, just don't have.
Well, I had a professor in American foreign policy who made one clear point. He said, the strength of the African liberation movement was that they understood that whether they spoke or did not speak, the predicament was clear. And that's our situation.
Yes.
Whether you
Yes.
speak or you don't speak,
Speak.
my brother,
Yes.
you in the Bahamas, whoever in charge, and they will handle you in whatever way you allow them to handle
That
you.
is
So
true.
you need to get your voice out there.
And
That's
that is-
because the people have never really understood who always had the real power.
That's correct.
When the Progressive Party's vision would have been crafted initially, many of our people didn't read. And so allowing Lyndon Pindling and others, Sir Randolph Fox, who were great orators, to become the voice of the movement was a matter of where we were at the time.
Yes.
That is no longer the case. Many of the people, the citizens, have way more ability, training, whatever, than the leaders.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying really is we have not realized as a people where the real problem is. All we got to do is look in the mirror. The real problem with the impasse and the paralysis is the Bahamian people's view of how they want their country managed.
Okay.
And we've abdicated our own responsibility. The real enemy is right in the mirror.
Yes.
We can fix this. We can do better than this.
Yes.
We must.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and
I
so
agree.
we are advocates of this paralysis. Then
That's correct.
In fact, inject the elephant.
Well,
what do they call it?
let me take responsibility. I've been involved with a particular party for years,
Okay.
and became an apologist for it, literally apologizing for what it might have failed to do, for the climate that it allowed to take over, for the rot that set in. And so members of the various political organizations, or two major ones in this country, we are responsible for what we have allowed.
The dogma has sort of taken over.
Well, the dysfunction that we've allowed that has totally wiped out a system of merit.
It's interesting that you say that. Paul Moore says here, and this is an excellent letter, much different than Branville's letter, must I say. But as Branville didn't get to too many real points. But Paul says, I've resigned from the PLP primarily because I feel I can better serve the country by shedding all vestiges of party dogma and loyalty.
I hear them, but let me say this. Both of these gentlemen, to me, display the same kind of sociopathic personality disorder
goodness.
that we have.
Okay,
Where is
explain that.
Where is the evidence that they have any real involvement directly in the community? I know Branville McCartney did a midterm report the other day, and apparently there are some people in Bamboo Town who say he's great. I don't know great based on what? Based on the press release?
Well,
or based on a real meaningful
I know Paul
program?
Morse has set up a resource center in St. Cecilia. He has
Is it
children
functioning
that-
this week?
I-
See, I
no,
know,
that I don't know.
I know when it got started, and so what I'm showing you is, I worked in Barack Obama's campaign in 08 in California, and everybody keeps missing it. It is not that he's young. There's nowhere in the world that people elevate you to leadership because you're young.
Youth is not the argument.
That is real idiocy. What Barack Obama did was to organize a grassroots movement of millions of people on the computer. And so when he came to the Democratic Convention, he came with numbers.
Yes.
And so all of these brilliant young minds, they look to me like a perpetuation of the same nonsense that got us here. Where are your people? What have you done? Oh, you just woke up one morning and you decided you wanted to have a political party.
Yeah.
You decided
we have
one
a
day.
couple of them here.
Yeah, you decided one day you want to be prime minister. Well, I understand that. Based on what you're seeing, you've determined that anyone can. But guess what? We're not allowing that anymore.
No.
You've got to come with the goods, which is a very clear indication to us that you meet the psychological character profile of what we need for leadership.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
the problem here, believe me,
Mr. Thompson, give us some comments on this, and then we'll change the topic. Go to
No,
talk about
I
young people.
agree with what Lady Russell has said, because you see, the character element is very essential and very important. Plus, they should have a track record of what they have done in cooperation with the local people.
Okay.
Okay? Because this just coming out of the woods and just coming and say, I want to be your MP, or I want to do something, or I want an office of responsibility, that is a selfish attitude.
Okay.
Okay?
And we're not
we
saying
need to
that
get
Mr.
rid of that.
Mr. Moss has
No,
done
I'm
that.
speaking to the
Okay.
issue. I'm
Okay.
not talking about him in particular.
Okay.
But when you look at the evidence that you see in the country, it is short-lived. After the campaign is over, it just dies.
Yes.
And so the people are left stranded. Let us see where you really stand with these people in terms of your involvement, in terms of your commitment to positive change in those communities.
Let's move on to what we're really getting to here, young people. This is some of our challenge. I spoke about this before. I'll say it again. I had a cousin, 6 years old, in school, government school, I won't call the name of the school, can't read, at the top of his first grade class. I've met 12th graders functionally illiterate. I know of a school in the Bahamas, I think it's the largest high school in Nassau, which obviously is the largest high school in the Bahamas. Out of the 15,000 to 2,000 students, less than 50 are over 3.0. What we got going on? And then we got suicides. We have all kinds of challenges with young people.
Yes,
Where are we getting to? What is this your generation's fault, or is it not?
I think, yes, I take personal responsibility largely for what I'm looking at, and I take responsibility not just as a citizen, but as a female, mother, citizen of the country. Women have allowed a lot of this rot. We ought to, as parents, to have taken an interest in what was going on in our schools.
Yeah, but where were the men? Where were the men? I don't think we can just blame it on women. Women seem to have been staying the course and doing what they're supposed to do.
Here's what we allowed. We didn't expose these men for what they were. Our children have taken...
We covered for them.
Yes.
Okay.
And I used to wonder about that. Why was the Bahamian woman so silent and complacent on issues that ought to have been exposed all these years? And I'm finding out a very, very nasty and ugly picture. Our women have been largely equally as compromised.
Just like when a woman is a Jezebel and we talk about it, we should talk about a man when he is no good, ain't doing what he's supposed to do, not committed to his children, as opposed to glamorizing the figure of a man, which is a procreator, as opposed to a man responsible.
Yes.
I feel, Mr. Thompson, give me some.
Well, see, God says that the man is to be the head of the family. Okay, the men have fallen down. I know in my years' experience in dealing with young men in particular, the fathers are absent. They're just not there.
Okay.
You will find that even in some instances, the mothers are absent. They're taken care of by an aunt, by some older uncle, or probably a grandmother. And so you find that the male child in particular doesn't have the kind of positive image in the home. He goes to school, he sees the female. He stays at home, he sees the female. He goes in the shop, he sees the female. So he doesn't see anyone that looks like him to set an impression and an impact on his personal life that could steer him in the right direction. Now, another thing is the mothers themselves perhaps have been negligent to the point where they didn't seek the kind of help which is available, you know, if they really want it, so that their boys can grow up to become responsible. Because I've found with young people in particular, basic concepts of honesty and integrity are missing.
Yes.
They lie about the simplest little things.
Lady Russell, you have the last word.
Well, a lot of things have been happening to our children, and we haven't even acknowledged. For example, I brought a clip here, Monday, March 15, News Extra. Vatican denies celibacy rule led to sex scandal. Now, our children in this society have been largely damaged by this organization and others in our school systems, where we're just now finding out on the front pages of our newspaper what kinds of things have been happening to them. And what did we do? Nothing.
Yeah.
Cases that were brought in 2003 are only just now being resolved. 2010, and so I know that this issue of sexual preference, this issue of wholeness of young people, we need to look at it, because what we're producing is a generation of damaged children who will not be able to recover from what we've allowed to happen to them and help to create a healthy society. It just will not happen. You cannot use a politically correct label to cover what is deep psychological damage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Lady Russell says that we've apologized for bad fathers, we've apologized for the church in error, we've apologized for our parties doing foolishness. We seem to be very apologetic. I have some challenges with that. We'll fix that when we come back from this break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We just had a heated discussion about a lot of issues going on in this nation, but as you know, I like to focus on some cultural things and make sure that our viewers know what's going on in writing in the country. I have this book. It's called Real and Authentic Ghost Stories from Around the Bahamas. 1010, the Bible 10. We are all familiar with that, and I have here to discuss it the book's author, Mr. Alfonso L.R. Smith, Justice of the Peace. He's a former Assistant Director of Immigration and now turned author. Mr. Smith, how are you doing, sir?
Fine, thank you.
I thank you very much for coming here today. I just want people to know how we met. I was walking down Bay Street and happened to run into you, and you stopped me and you said, "Man, you're that fella from the show, you know?" I appreciate you. You reached right in your bag and you handed me this book. And I took this book home, started reading it. It scared me a little bit, you know. Some of the stories on it, a little scary. It had me saying 10, the Bible 10.
Okay.
But what inspired you to write this book about the authentic and real ghost stories?
Okay, first of all, let me say thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson, for inviting me here today to discuss this book. And let me tell you how I meet you. I'm a man, I'm a positive thinking person.
Amen.
I believe in positive thinking all along.
I'm with you.
After I get to writing the book, then I start to put together sales and marketing strategy.
Okay.
And as I make up my list, I put down the name of the people who I want to give a copy of this book to.
Okay.
And so as I can bring it to the attention of the general public.
Okay.
That day when I met you, I went by the Ministry of Tourism, and my car was parked over by the post office. And then I say, after I left the Ministry of Tourism, I said I was going to come back George Street and go straight to my car, but something said no, go down Bay Street.
Yeah.
Came down Bay Street. I met a couple of people. I stopped by a stall where a lady was selling some stuff, and I talked with her. I left there just in time to meet you opposite this opposite building, and that's how we met. Now, what inspired me to write this book? The inspiration came from within.
Yes.
In fact, I think you really cannot inspire people or motivate people externally to get them to do things. It was the burning desire in me to talk about these ghost stories and things that I experienced as a child, and I decided that I should put that in writing. And at my stage in life now, you know, I have to do things now. I can't wait for tomorrow.
Yeah, well, that's what I always say on this show.
Right, I start writing the book, and within 3 to 4 months, I had it completed, and we took it to the printing place in Miami.
There's a story in this book that talks about, I mean, you go through a number of them. Let me list off some of them. The Ghosts of Arthurtown, the Ghosts of Hoghead Grape Tree, Tammany Ghosts of Little River, the Pig Cat Woman Ghost, the Ghost in the Church, Grandmother's Funeral, the Setting Up. That's the setting up of the funeral.
Right.
Preparing the body for burial, the Burial Society, making of the coffin. There's a lot of people that don't know, and I learned that by reading this book this week, that back when you buried people in the Family Islands, there was a whole process. And I mean, you go through it. You say, listen, there's a process that you have to go through because there were no burial homes.
No.
There was no process of, what's the term? It evades me now. Embalming process.
Yeah, right.
So you had to bury people 2 days after they died.
12 hours.
And
12 hours after that.
So you had to engage the fella to build a coffin because they didn't have an inventory of coffins sitting around in the burial home.
Right, yeah.
So there's a fellow who had to build a coffin. You had to get the body prepared, and within 2 days, it was all over. This is a whole process, and these are the kind of cultural stories that are important. Young people like myself need to be able to read this history, because if something happened to you today, God forbid, I still got it.
Right.
Your grandchildren still got it. It's still here.
And it's a story that will never grow old.
No.
This book is something like, it'll be something like the Bible.
Yes.
The older you get, the better it is. Because everybody knows about ghost story. Every Christmas you get the story of Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghosts, and even on television in cartoon form, you have ghost stories.
Yes.
So it'll be senseless for somebody to say, I don't believe in ghosts. The children watch ghosts on television every day and all
Yes.
kinds of ghost stories. And I just thought I should.
Well,
write
you
about
know,
that.
I'm quite the skeptic when it comes to strange beliefs. But my grandmother, I talked about her earlier in the introduction to the show, Natalie Harvey. She talked to us about ghosts and these stories. And somebody say, oh, your grandma used to tell you ghost stories. I said, no, my brother. My grandma used to tell me about stories with ghosts in it.
With ghosts in it,
That's
yeah.
real story.
Yeah.
That ain't no ghost story you tell
Yeah.
children ooh before they go to bed.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. As now an author, there are a lot of counterparts of yours in your generation that have not sought to write their stories down. I complain about this all the time because I'm a fella. I like to read. I like to research. Every time I'm on Facebook and I type into people, I say, I reading and researching. And they, man, you always doing that.
Yeah.
That's what I do all the time. I've read every book that Jones Communications has come out with about the Parliament and all of this stuff, 100 Great Bahamians. I've consumed it all. Gail Sanders has written books. There's another fella, his name escapes me now. You have poems. Marion Bethel writes poems. All this stuff, all this material. But it's still limited, right?
Yeah,
Marguerite Penland has just released a book.
right. Yeah.
Similar to yourself, she wrote the book on her story. Last night, I read the story written by Tashina Robinson Blair of Ingram, Hubert Ingram, Barefoot to Prime Minister. Who else is published? Godfrey Innes is publishing a book on agriculture to be an official on agriculture. But then you have the Paul Adderleys, who, no book. Nothing
No
yet.
book, nothing.
You have
Nothing
the Arthur
recorded.
folks.
Yeah.
No book.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what do they think will happen when they die? They think we can just remember them because they're special?
No.
Because they was government this and government that and lawyer this and that. I don't understand it. But how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like all of us should write something about our past so that, you know, our legacy could go on into the future. And, of course, you would lost the part of your culture if people like me and other older people
Exactly.
don't write and put some things in writing.
Exactly.
For instance, in this book, I tell of a ghost story, whereas my cousin, he was courting a lady in a settlement 2 miles away. And, of course, he went to see her, and he stayed there until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then time for him to go back home. He had to walk back home because that's the only way to get back. And, of course, he was alone on the road, and he went. He could have taken 2 roads back home, the King Road or the Bay Road. So he decided to walk the Bay Road back home,
Okay.
and it was a moonlit night. He got onto the Bay Road, and he turned, make a right, going towards Victoria Point where he lived in, and right in front of him he saw a man, and this is the ghost from Beantown. This guy was a carpenter from Beantown, and he dressed just like the man he knew. He was walking with a hump over. He was humming
Everything was the
song.
same.
Everything is the same. He had a katakoo on his shoulder, a bag, a straw bag. They carry his tools, etc., etc. And he provided my cousin company all the way home. My cousin was trying to catch up with him.
Okay.
And he make all kinds of effort to catch up with this person, and the person in front of him is making no effort to get away from him,
Yeah.
but yet he couldn't catch up.
Okay.
He walked behind this guy until he got to a bend in the road to the Blue Hole. We come to the Blue Hole, and then there's a curve in the road where you had to curve to the right to go to the public road, or if you go straight, you go straight into the Blue Hole.
Okay.
And this guy make his turn. When he get there and he make his turn, he look ahead, nothing.
My.
Disappear. And then he realized that, look, I wasn't following the real person. But here it is. I'm telling you this story because a lot of people think that ghosts are evil and ghosts are bad.
Yeah.
Ghosts are not evil. They are friendly. And from my experience, all my experience was friendly. They help you, and they do things, you know, which is good.
Let's talk about some of the myths. You've done the research, so I
Yeah.
could ask you.
Yeah.
Are there some evil ghosts though? Are there some of them who they say trying to pull you into some place where you shouldn't go and you don't follow them or something like that? I've heard stories about that.
I would think there is. And if a ghost appear to you to be a bad man,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know some bad people, like Blackbeard or one of those guys.
You can't follow them, sir.
So if you see a ghost appear to you in that image, then of course you may think in terms of him being a bad person.
Okay.
But from my experience, generally they are good. They help you, and they don't harm you.
Okay.
Now the only thing that causes a little fright is the sudden appearance and the sudden disappearance. All of a sudden you're walking down a lonely road and whammy, right in front of you is
Goes
somebody.
right there.
Right? And the thing is that you're not conscious of it at the time. At that time, you would never say that is a ghost.
Okay.
I'll tell you of another story. One day I went to my grandfather's yard where we always used to go to get fruits.
Okay.
One of the grandchildren was living with him. We call him Junior. When I got to the sapodilly tree, which is one of the favorite fruit trees in the yard, Junior was on the other side getting fruits just like me.
Yes.
Right? I paid no mind. I went about my business looking for fruit from tree to tree, here and there, so forth. About half an hour later, I decided to go back home, and I said, before I go, I'll talk to Junior and socialize a little.
Okay.
Look all over the yard, couldn't find Junior. Right? He was just there 30 minutes ago. That evening, when my grandfather and my grandmother came out of the farm, and I tell them the story, they said, Junior couldn't be there. He said, he was with us in the farm. He said, we left home 7 o'clock in the morning. I went by about 10 o'clock that day, and there was Junior on the other side.
My goodness.
You know, and like I say,
I get scared. This background dark, you can't be talking them story. But I appreciate you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the name of the book is Real and Authentic Ghost Stories from Around the Bahamas. 1010, the Bible 10. One last question. 1010, the Bible 10. That works?
Yeah.
That just get the ghost to run.
Now, I have a section in the book called The Superstitious Code of Conduct.
Okay.
If you are confronted with a ghost, you spin around 3 times and you spit on the ground and shout, 10, the Bible 10, and they disappear.
That's it.
Now, my mother used to not only do that, but on the back of that, she used to throw a dress over her head.
Oh, Lord.
And
all
then,
right. Mr. Smith, thank you very much. This has been very entertainment. Little scary, but very entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Spin around 3 times, 10, the Bible 10, throw your dress over your head. Make sure you're in public. And don't play like you don't know about these stories, because your grandmother told it to you, Natalie Harvey told it to me. We all are familiar, and we all find some truth in it. We'll be back right after these messages. Well, we sure had an interesting show this week. We talked to our 2 great citizen journalists, and then we get scared up a little bit with these ghost stories. This week, we can change it up a bit. We want to praise a citizen of the week. And that citizen of the week this week, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than our proudest representative, Chris Brown, the fireman. Somebody called the fire engine for Chris Brown. He won a gold medal this week, a first for him in Doha, Qatar. I don't even know where that is, and that's a shame. I study international relations. At the IAAF World Indoor Championship in the men's 400 meters, he ran his season's best, 45.96 seconds, to beat American Bershawn Jackson. Chris, listen, them boiled fish we used to cook for you at Coconuts, they had a little something to do with how you get your thing. And a goal is something nice to bring home in a recession, like Mr. Burnside say in the sideburns for this week. Chris, you are the citizen of the week. Next week, we'll have someone else to highlight to make sure that Bahamians understand that Citizens Review is a fair show. We love our citizens. We love the Bahamas. We make room for everybody on here who do great stuff, and we point out those who do foolishness. And by the way, Mr. Brown, they cheat you last time in the Olympics. We was watching, man, and that fella, it was like, yeah, and here. Almost. But you got your goal now. Don't worry about that. You're married. You got your children. Good luck, sir. Keep doing good work. Next up, our favorite portion, the citizens' arrests. Now, our arrestee this week has some nerve. Last week, we was in Grand Bahama talking about Nico Grant. Actually, issues here in Nassau, but we were dealing with a Grand Bahama fella. This week, we back in Grand Bahama because I got some emails and I saw a news story that dealt with the Grand Bahama Power Company. Now listen. I'm born and raised in Grand Bahama. And when you hear the stories about Ben O'Brien, and I told you about my grandmother, she made the post-slavery experience real. That means I know the stories about how after 7 o'clock you had to go out 8 Mile Rock and West End and out East End because you couldn't stay in Grand Bahama until Penland did the bend or break speech. And this week, Penland's birthday coming up, we appreciate Lady Penland for timing her book released so very well to tell the story and emphasize her husband's 10th anniversary of his death and his birthday this year. The point is, the Grand Bahama Power Company should be ashamed of itself. And let me tell you why. 8 Mile Rock and West End are on the western side of Grand Bahama. You know Grand Bahama got that little peak? Let me show you. See it right here? Right here. Grand Bahama got this little peak that goes up like so. And that peak far from the city. So people who live in 8 Mile Rock and West End have to go all the way into Freeport to pay their bills. But you know why that happened? Because the Grand Bahama Power Company decided that they were going to close their western branch for the pay station. Here's my problem. When you have a monopoly on one commodity meaning that we can't live without power. We needed to wash, we needed to bake our food and eat and cook and bathe in clean water. When you can't live without that, and you have a company that has a monopoly on it, they have to be able to at least collect your money because you got to pay them. And they were considering moving the pay station into Freeport. And the same people who can't afford the expensive bills right now would have to then pay for transportation to get to Freeport to pay the bill. The Grand Bahama Power Company this week, you're locked up. Stop doing foolishness, man. People do not deserve this kind of treatment. We are citizens of this country. We have equal stake. And if you are going to be allowed to own a monopoly, you have to at least be willing to collect our money from us with a reasonable location. That's all we ask. If you can rape the poor, at least come to their neighborhood to rape them and don't make them drive to you so you could take their money for unreasonably priced power. That's all I'm saying. And this week we also want to highlight Obie Wilshcombe, the Member of Parliament for West End and Bimini. Now, Mr. Wilshcombe, we have reservations, but we can highlight you this week because you were the person that tackled the issue. Let's get Mr. Wilshcombe picture up on the screen today. We being positive. Mr. Wilshcombe, you highlighted the issue. You talked to the Port Authority. You made sure that they protected the people of Grand Bahama. We thank you for that. Now all we need you to do is extend that into getting them to cancel the Horseville Creek Agreement and let the Port Authority free the people of Grand Bahama so they could own their own land. If you could do that for us, we'll appreciate it. If you can't, you're no Penling, so perhaps you can't get that done. But we appreciate you for doing the little bit that you did to look out for the people in 8 Mile Rock. I grew up partly in Seagrape, and so you can't mess with them people. Grand Bahama Port Company and the Power Company, you all watch out, because that monopoly taking advantage of people will not be tolerated on Citizens Review. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for watching the show this week. The show has been good. We've gotten a lot of support. I want to point out Rosemary Hannah, who wrote me a letter. She is my good member at St. Agnes Church, and she is a very, very well-educated, she accesses the web like young people, man. Miss Rosemary, she got good stuff going on. But thank you all for supporting the show. Tune in at www.citizensreviewtv.com. Thank you for joining us. Had a great show this week.